So with number 5, for this one, we're doing 16 equal subintervals. All right, using a right-hand Riemann sum. So I'm not going to draw all of the rectangles here. But it's going from 0 to 4, 4 divided by 16. That means each one is going to have a base of 1/4. All right, so again, I'm not going to draw all of them. We don't need that. As long as we kind of get the first few. And what I'm going to do is write out the area of the first few just to kind of see that pattern so I can set up my sum. So for our first one, our base is 1/4 times the height. To figure out the height, all we're doing is putting an x value into the function, right? 4x minus x squared. So what x value are we putting in for this first rectangle? 1/4, right? That is at x equals 1/4. So we're doing 4 times 1/4 minus 1/4 squared. That's the area of our first rectangle. Right? This is base 1. This is height 1, right? We're taking the base of the first rectangle times the height of the first rectangle. Then, second one is going to have the same base, but to find the height, it's a different number that we have to plug in, right? What x value are we plugging in for this second rectangle? 1/2, right? 1/4, and then we go up another 1/4. That's 1/2. So we have 4 times 1/2 minus 1/2 squared. So this is our second base times the second height. And then let's just do one more here. Still has the same base of 1/4. To find the height for our third one, the x value that we're plugging in is 3/4. So 4 times 3/4 minus 3/4 squared. And that would keep going on for all 16 rectangles, but we don't want to write all those out. We don't want to calculate all those by hand. So what we're going to do is kind of set up our formula. Right? All we're doing is taking the base times the height of all these rectangles and adding them up. So we're going to set up a sum where we have the base times the height. Now I'm not going to leave it as base times height. I'm going to write it out as kind of a formula. But we're doing this from n equals 1 to what? 16, right? Because there's 16 equal subintervals.
There's subintervals.
Yep. So we're taking, if we look at these, everything in these are the same except for what's in those parentheses. Right? That's the only difference here. So our formula that we're going to put in here is going to be the base, which is always the same, times the height, which we get by taking 4 times some x value minus that x value squared. We just need to figure out how do we represent that x value. We can't just make it n, because if that were the case, the first one we'd be putting 1 in. That's not what's in there. Can't put 2, our second one would be 2. That's not what's in there. We have to figure out this pattern using a little series and put a formula in for what x is going to be. So I'm going to take those highlighted numbers and write them down here. We've got 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. What would the next one be? 1, and right, we can keep going. What's the pattern? It's going up by 1/4. So we talked about writing formulas like this. We have a common difference of 1/4, so it's going to be 1/4 times n plus c. And c is the value we get from taking this first one minus the common difference. So if we take 1/4 minus 1/4, we just get 0, right? So we can write a sub n, or what goes in here, as just 1/4 n, or n over 4. So there's our formula.
Wait, I'm sorry. And this the whole 0 thing.
Okay. This formula we talked about before, a sub n equals dn plus c. D is the common difference, which we established is 1/4. C is, we talked about C equals the first term minus the common difference. So the first term in our sequence here is 1/4 minus the common difference of 1/4 would be 0.
Okay.
Here's our formula. Here's our sum. Now we can go ahead and put that in our calculator once we have it set up. So the nice thing is we just did this on a different problem. So if you want to, what we can do is just hit second enter. We get all of that stuff again. We just have to make some changes. So instead of the 0.5, I'm going to insert a 2 there, so we have 0.25 for the 1/4 out in front. Remember, we simplified this part, 4 times n over 4. In this case, that's just going to be x. So this is no longer 2x, it's just going to be x. Minus n over 4 squared, so I'm going to change the x over 2 to x over 4 squared. And the other change we need to make is that it's going from 1 to 16. Make sure you don't lose any commas or anything in between as you're editing. Make sure everything's looks right, and then you can hit enter. So we get 10.625 for our area. So last time we got, what was it, 10.5? So we're getting a little bit closer here. Remember, the more rectangles we use, the more accurate our answer is going to be.